So welcome everyone today to Baby Magic. We are talking about a very mysterious, usually magic, you get a good feeling about it, like it was so magical. Today we're going to talk about something that it doesn't feel so good. It's still magical and it's still very mysterious. We're going to talk about what happens when a baby doesn't make it, when either the baby doesn't make it to term and isn't born alive, or when the baby dies in the womb and is born early, or when a mom actually decides to have an abortion because of her own reasons. All of these things are tied up into what we're going to talk about today. And today I'm going to be chatting with someone who has very, very generously decided to share her story about early baby loss. So, hi, I'd just love you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura. I'm a stay-at-home mom of 3 children that are with me and one that is not. And I'm a stay-at-home mom, homeschool mom, and pretty much being a mom is my life.
So I know that you were expecting your 4th child in August, which is coming up soon. Where did you give birth to your other 3 children?
The other 3 were born in the hospital. I was on waiting list to be with a midwife for my 3rd child, and I just never got a call back. So she was born in the hospital as well.
And your births were reasonably straightforward, even though kind of hospital based, or?
My children were very easy births. There were some interventions that I wasn't completely comfortable with, but overall, they went well.
So what were your birth dreams for this child?
For this child, I was looking for either, to be followed by a midwife or more along the lines of a wild pregnancy to, take my power back and just basically do it all by intuition and have a home birth. Home birth was basically, what I had my heart set on, to be able to birth at home and have that calm and that peaceful environment without, being picked and probed at for the time that you're in the hospital and not being fed when you're hungry. And it just felt right to have an unassisted birth at home.
So how did his birth unfold in the end?
I ended up miscarrying at 16 weeks. It happened at home, so I did get the home birth aspect that I was hoping for, just not in the context that I had imagined. And so I lost him at home. It happened at home, and it was unassisted as well.
I've been thinking a lot about that word miscarriage, and I chose not to use it in this podcast episode because I think that a lot of the it's almost like a blamey kind of word, like miscarriage, like you didn't carry properly, or misbehaving, miscarriage. I'd like you to talk a little bit about how that affects you, how you tell your story out in the world, what are people saying, how does that unfold in the maybe groups of mums that you speak with, or just generally in your community?
Well, I guess depending, a lot of people don't know how to react to, our story. And I think just any child loss story, a lot of people just don't know how to react to it. But when you talk about blame and things like that, a lot of people didn't, only the people who were close to me knew about our plans to home birth and have an unassisted birth. But there were some comments that were pretty hurtful, saying, well, maybe it's because you're plant-based, or comments like that that were extremely extremely hurtful, in the sense that it was just, I find, heartless to come out and blame, like you said, something that I did wrong, that made it so that my child didn't make it. A lot of the other comments we get as well is, oh, it's very sad, but okay, next. You're young, you can have other ones, as if uh, he was like, we're mourning the loss of our son, and to be told to jump so quickly, it's okay, you can have another one, but we're mourning the loss of this one. So I guess it's been all over the place with the different comments that we've gotten, and that's probably been the most difficult part of the process, is comments from other people.
It's so weird because I know when anyone's dog or cat dies, I'm sorry to be so callous, but honestly, when a dog or cat dies, everyone's all like, "Oh, well, you should really wait. Don't get another one right away." Like, and then someone loses a baby and they're like, "Oh, well, you can get pregnant again. Don't worry, you can have another one." It's so odd the way our culture can't deal with death and grieving, especially in these circumstances where, like, I'm torn up inside. Honestly, like, I am torn up inside about your story, and I'm sure obviously you are way more torn up inside, but it seems like our culture as a whole cannot deal with loss and doesn't know how to approach people that have had a loss. How have you and your family and your other children dealt with this?
So it was something that we placed a lot of importance on. It was something that was, the pregnancy, the home birth, all of that was, everybody was, uh, it was a family thing, so the kids were involved and everything. And after we lost the baby, we made sure, I mean, my kids were not here when it happened. And so we made sure to show the kids, um, our little boy, and explain to them that their little brother didn't make it. And we did, a like a family goodbye, where we all said goodbye to him. We also we had him cremated, which was something that we did as a family. We went to the funeral home all together and picked out a little urn all together as a family. And so we also, my husband and I, placed a lot of importance on answering any questions the kids had, explaining it to them, age appropriate for each of the boys. And my daughter is still 2, so she doesn't understand too much, but we still explained it to her the best we could. And we continue to answer their questions, and just, spend time to talk about what happened, talk about the emotions, acknowledge their emotions, what they were feeling. And all in all, I think it's brought us closer and made us, given us a stronger, deeper bond as a family.
So how do you think we can change mothers' experiences of early baby loss?
Um, One thing that I did notice is that people's focus was all on the physical. So it was, are you okay? Have you gotten checked by a doctor? Have you gotten blood tests? It was all focused on the physical. And truthfully, that's not where I took the hit. I was completely fine physically, but emotionally, that was an extreme, there was an extreme hit emotionally. And I think that we need to focus more on being there emotionally for mothers who go through losing a child. It's the most devastating and heartbreaking experience ever, and they need as much emotional support, even if it's just listening to them, sharing their story or sharing their emotions, asking them, you know, how they're feeling. That it's emotional support. I think that that would really um, that would really be a game changer, because I think that's what we lack the most.
Well, we lack it in the most intense parts of our lives, and we also lack it in pretty much any part of our lives that can't be like put like kind of anesthetized. Like when one reason why I stopped going to births in the hospital was I didn't want to hear someone telling a laboring woman to, stop making noise or, um, you know, want to kind of act as her primal self would act. And I think, loss, birth, all of these really primal events are events that we as a society can't deal with. We can't deal with those big emotions. We don't know how to act with pain. We just take a pill, or the birth of a child. We try and like temper it and make it sterile. So I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. The emotional, spiritual side of life pretty much is something lacking.
Yes, definitely.
How has your baby's birth affected your feelings and your opinions about how and where you would want to give birth if you did choose in the future to have another child?
Um, I mean, in the beginning, it was kind of all over the place. I wasn't sure of my decision because I guess, like you said, I was blaming myself. But I have lost a lot of faith in, you know, the way that the medical system is going right now. I had decided to, you know, see a doctor, and after not being able to get an appointment with one, I went to a private clinic where they told me they would be able to check everything, and they sent me back saying, oh, it looks like you got a bladder infection, and we don't check the baby. So um, I still have the dream to home birth. um, I would My dream is to be able to birth a baby without having any drugs to accelerate the process, like pitocin, or having, you know, without an IV, basically.
Yeah.
uh, Doing it as natural as possible, because it's something that I have not gotten to experience up to now, except with Silvano, you know, because I was at home when I miscarried, and I'm very happy that I was at home. It was the best place I could have been. Yes, it was traumatic, but uh, I assessed the situation, and it was done, you know, in a way that I was able to. It was done the least traumatic possible. So, for future plans, I would love to be able to birth a baby um, without an IV in my arm.
And why shouldn't you, honestly? Why shouldn't you be able to give birth to a baby without an IV? I mean, of course, sometimes you need to have an IV in your arm while you're birthing. Very rarely, complications happen. But why on earth shouldn't you? Why should you have to, run to the ends of the earth to be able to give birth without an IV in your arm? It's ridiculous. So,
Totally agree. I totally agree. And like you said, there are situations where it is necessary. However, I have, with my 3 births in the hospital, there were no complications. Um, you know, the birthing process was happening, the labor was progressing on its own, and I guess it was just taking too long for, you know, their liking. And so all 3 times I was put on pitocin, which, you know, makes it extremely more painful. My second was, I got to the hospital and I was 7 centimeters dilated, and they still put me on the pitocin. So it's something that I've, you know, figured out that this makes the birthing process a lot more painful than it has to be. Again, there are situations where it could be helpful. However, in my case, both myself and my babies were healthy and everything was going fine. And so I think that it was unnecessary.
I love the name Silvano. I have to tell you, whenever I hear that name, I think of the 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 name itself means like a forest or woods or trees, and I just feel like I'm in a forest when I hear that name. So I imagine that informed your choice of names.
Yeah, well, I love names with meanings. And it was supposed to be my husband to choose the name, and he had come up with a couple that we were on the fence about. And that one night I was just online and I was looking up ancient names
Yeah,
and came across a name that I don't even remember what it was. And it just came to me and I said, what about Silvano? And when I looked up the meaning, it said man of the forest.
yeah.
And we both just fell in love with it. And it's such a beautiful name. So there is a part of me that has that sadness that I won't be able to call his name, and as he's growing. And but I do realize that everything happens for a reason, and so we're very happy that we chose that name for him. It was the perfect name for him.
And the thing about wild pregnancy and unassisted birth and living a life of that you own, a sovereign life. The thing about that is that life does go into pathways that you maybe didn't want or expect, obviously. So you had a wild pregnancy and it went to a place where you totally weren't expecting. No one around you was expecting it either, and it's heartbreaking, but I think that name has something to do with it. Just the wildness of life and the grace where you can accept what happens and not celebrate, but value it. I look at you and your family with so much respect. Just the way that you
Thank
took
you.
that experience and just like made it whole and made it valuable. It's quite something.
Thank you. I did my absolute best, with my intuition, and not many people understand, but it was an empowering experience because something about this pregnancy that just so strong in me was like, you know, calling to do it in a different way, in a way that, resonated with me on all levels. There's been, like I said, I had good experiences with my birth. However, there were, things like the IV or um, not being fed enough at the hospital, being picked and probed at. And it was just, um, and, even the loss of Silvano was something that was empowering because it was all done intuitively. I might have panicked in the moment, but something, my intuition kicked in, and it's like with instinct I knew exactly what to do, and how it needed to be done. And my husband tells me he doesn't understand how I assessed the situation, because I was the patient and the doctor at the same time, telling him, okay, you need to do this, you need to. Then he was the one panicking, and he's like, you were so calm and you just knew what to do. So it's definitely been an empowering experience. It was very sad, and it's still very sad. I'm still very heartbroken. But it empowered me in ways that I never thought possible.
So, what advice would you give someone who is experiencing the types of symptoms of early baby loss that you experienced? What would you say to her if she came to you?
Um, I would say to listen to your body. That's the most important. I know that the mom heart has a way of playing with us a little bit, to for myself, I was in denial a little bit of what was going on. Um, and just to trust your intuition. That's the most important, is like to listen to your body and trust your intuition because it'll always guide you where you need to be. The day I lost Silvano, the day of, I had gone to the hospital, and my husband was told he was not allowed to stay with me. And something so strong in me I said, I'm not staying alone. I just didn't want to stay alone. And so it's like at that moment I was given that choice, to of that's basically what the nurse told me. Okay, that's fine, that's your choice, madame. And I got up and I walked out. And for me personally, in the way that it happened, it was in the best way. Maybe for other moms, they would have felt more insecurity to stay at the hospital. So that's why I'm saying to trust your intuition and follow your instinct about, what you feel is best for you.
That's so important. It's just so important in the whole kind of natural birth movement. I hate to think of people out there who are being bullied by the natural birth people, because like I see people bullied by the maternity system, and I have to say that I also see people bullied by the natural maternity system, and no one should have to do something that they don't feel is right. So if you want to go home, go home. If you want to stay at the hospital, stay at the hospital. But Laura, you're absolutely right. Just you have to listen to what you need, what your intuition, what your body's telling you, what your soul is telling you.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. That's the best advice I can give. I know that not everyone is able to assess the situation, of what I went through. I was completely on my own, and my husband was actually waiting for me in the car. I had no phone with me. I had nothing. And so I realized that not everyone is able to assess this situation, which is why I'm saying the most important advice is to trust yourself and do what feels best for you. So if, you experience symptoms of, early child loss, and it feels right, to see a healthcare provider, then go with that. And if it doesn't, then, but at the end of the day, I think that our body lets us know what's going on. Our body speaks to us constantly. And so I was able to assess my situation. I did check my vital signs. Afterwards, I checked for hemorrhaging and things like that. But if I would have felt that I needed to go to a hospital or be at the, to be checked because something was wrong, then I would have gone. But like I said, there's no right or wrong here. But as long as the mom feels respected and she feels like she's where she needs to be, then that's what's the most important.
Absolutely. So I always ask my people to give one word for our listeners. What word would you choose?
Of the overall experience, you mean, or
just something for them to take away with them, a word that they can take away today or when they listen to this episode, and something for them to think about.
Intuition.
Thank you. That's perfect. So I know, listeners, that I'm sure you understand that this is not a medical advice show. So we've listened to one story about one experience, but I want to let you know that in the case of the first trimester of pregnancy, before about 12 to 13 weeks, early miscarriage, unfortunately, or spontaneous abortion or baby loss is very common. It can sometimes be prevented with bed rest and treatments, and you can look into those yourself. I'm not going to suggest anything to you on the show. After the first trimester, that is around the time that Laura lost her little one, it's much more uncommon to lose a baby, and before about 20 weeks, if the baby's born, it will not survive. We're made to live in the womb at least until about 22 to 24 weeks. But if you start to labor after 22 to 24 weeks and you want to try to stop labor and stay pregnant, it is in your absolute best interest to get immediate attention from a medically trained midwife or physician. So don't use Dr. Google. Don't by any means use this podcast. Go and see someone who's actually, in the business of keeping mothers pregnant at that point in the pregnancy. Our stories as women are so important. We need to tell them. So, like Laura said, this is about physical. This is a physical thing that happens, but what we're talking about is the emotional and spiritual, deep, deep, deep effects of that.
Yes, definitely. And this just came to me because you did ask what advice I had, and if I could add to that, is don't be afraid to share your story. Don't be afraid to try again, because I think a lot of women, will experience loss of a child and then feel ashamed or shy or not want to share it. And I think it's really important for us to share, because the more that we share, the more that we realize that we're not alone. And there's a lot of people who go through it, a lot of women and a lot of families who have had the experience. And once we start sharing, we start realizing that we're not alone. So that's another piece of advice, is that you're not alone, and not to be afraid to share your story, and not to let that one experience keep you in fear of not moving forward or trying again for another child, because it doesn't mean that it happened X amount of times that that it'll continue to happen.
And shame is such a dangerous thing for women, because we feel ashamed of something our bodies have done, and then we keep it to ourselves, and then we just live in a cocoon of shame.
Totally agree.
So the more we share stories, the more we reach out, the more we listen to people's stories without judgment, the more we can chip away at that huge kind of brick wall of shame that is keeping us apart. So I want to thank you so much for sharing your family story with us. And I'm sure I'm going to get responses. People might want to reach out to you. Let's build a wall of stories.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast. It's been empowering, to share Silvano's story and to share our story, and I'm just honored, that for the invite to be on this podcast.
Well, I'm happy you came. Thank you so much.
Thank you for, your guidance and your support from the beginning, because I wouldn't be where I am today without meeting you back in December. So thank you for being you.
Well, thanks for the compliment.